Millions of American Christians describe themselves as born again. That phrase rests on a single Greek pun, a word that could just as easily be translated born from above. The ambiguity isn't a translation problem, it's the entire point. In the Gospel of John, Jesus speaks in riddles on purpose, and when people misunderstand him, that's not a failure of communication. It's the engine that drives the whole gospel. To see how this works, let's start with the most famous example, John chapter 3. A Pharisee named Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night, and in John's gospel, darkness is never just darkness. It's a symbol of spiritual blindness. Nicodemus opens with a compliment. We know you're a teacher from God. Jesus ignores the compliment entirely and responds with a non sequitur. No one can see the kingdom of God without being born anōthen. Here's where it gets interesting. That Greek word, anōthen, has two distinct meanings. It can mean from above, a heavenly divine origin, or it can mean again, a second time, repetition. English translations have to pick one. The King James Version chose born again. The New Revised Standard chose born from above. But the Greek sustains both meanings simultaneously. Nicodemus hears again and takes it literally. How can anyone be born after growing old? Can one enter a second time into the mother's womb? He's confused. And that confusion is not an accident. It's the point. The author of John crafted this exchange so that Nicodemus would grab the wrong meaning, forcing the reader to ask, what's the right one? The answer John wants you to reach is both, a divine rebirth that is also a radical new beginning. John layers a second pun on top of the first. A few verses later, Jesus says, the pneuma blows where it chooses, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes, so it is with everyone born of the pneuma. That word pneuma means both wind and spirit in Greek. Jesus exploits both meanings in a single sentence. The wind blows where it chooses, and that's the natural phenomenon. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. That's the divine reality. One word, two meanings, one sentence. John is doubling down on the ambiguity. Now watch what happens next. Nicodemus asks plainly, how can these things be? A reasonable question. Jesus could clarify. Instead, he rebukes. Are you a teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things? Then Nicodemus vanishes from the scene. No resolution, no moment of clarity. The reader is left to wrestle with the meaning alone. This is John's signature literary technique: ambiguous statement, literal misunderstanding, refusal to clarify, and the reader must do the interpretive work. This pattern repeats across the entire gospel. But Nicodemus at least came in good faith. What happens when Jesus uses this technique on people who already believe in him? John chapter 8 gives us the most dramatic case. The text specifies that Jesus is speaking to, and I'm quoting, the Jews who had believed in him. These are sympathetic listeners, supporters, and the conversation will end with them picking up stones to kill him. Here's how it unfolds. Jesus opens with an invitation. The truth will make you free. They push back. We're descendants of Abraham. We've never been slaves to anyone. Instead of de-escalating, Jesus escalates. You look for an opportunity to kill me. Remember, he's saying this to people who believe in him. Then harder, you're from your father, the devil. And then the climax. Before Abraham was, I am. That phrase, eimi in Greek, echoes Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, where God reveals the divine name to Moses. Jesus is claiming the name of God. The listeners understand exactly what he means. They pick up stones. The escalation from friendly dialogue to attempted execution takes 28 verses. And every step follows John's pattern: ambiguity, misunderstanding, escalation, and then a massive Christological claim, Christology. That's the study of who Jesus is. And in John, every controversy funnels toward that single question. This pattern isn't limited to John 8, water into wine at Cana, the bread of life discourse where followers abandon Jesus, healing on the Sabbath, the raising of Lazarus. Every one of these episodes provokes division, and every division circles back to the same question: who is this person? In John's Gospel, confusion and conflict aren't obstacles to understanding Jesus. They're the mechanism by which his identity gets revealed. Now we need to address something uncomfortable. The Gospel of John repeatedly refers to the Jews as if they're outsiders, opponents of Jesus. But Jesus is Jewish. His disciples are Jewish. Nicodemus is Jewish. Everyone in the story is Jewish. So what's going on? The answer lies in the Johannine community. Johannine meaning relating to the Gospel of John and its community. Scholars believe this community was a group of Jewish followers of Jesus who, by the time the Gospel was written, likely between 80 and 100 CE, had been expelled from or separated from the broader synagogue. John 9:22 even mentions people being put out of the synagogue for confessing Jesus as Messiah. The Gospel's us versus them language reflects this painful rupture. It's sectarian rhetoric. Sectarian meaning it reflects a group that has separated from a larger body. It is not a neutral description of Judaism. This matters for responsible reading. The text language about the Jews has been used throughout history to fuel anti-Jewish sentiment. Understanding the sectarian context doesn't erase that harm, but it does change how we interpret the rhetoric. This is an intra-Jewish conflict, not a conflict between two separate religions. That distinction didn't yet exist. So let's go back to where we started. Born again is one of the most influential phrases in American Christianity. Entire theological identities are built on it. But look at how different translations handle that single Greek word. The King James and NIV chose born again. The NRSV chose born from above. The ESV hedges with a footnote. Only the Greek original holds both meanings at once. A translation choice shaped an entire tradition. Next time you read John, watch for the pattern: ambiguity, misunderstanding, escalation, Christological claim. Once you see it everywhere. In John's Gospel, confusion isn't the obstacle to understanding Jesus, it's the path.